Hi, Richard here. Another devlog. Gonna do it quite a bit different this week. Gonna do a quick one talking just about rendering. A little bit about how it works. The motivation for talking about rendering a little bit is that most of my week this week was spent tracking down an issue in the shader that I wrote. Most of our objects in our game use a small number of custom shaders in order to achieve what we're doing with a level builder and terrain generation. And it took me a long time to figure it out. So the result of a week's worth of work in terms of changes to the game was I got rid of some seams and I made the textures much better in the distance. Unfortunately, sometimes things take a long time that don't seem like they would. So I'm just going to give a brief bit of info on how things are rendered in a 3D game for those that may not know and are interested. Partly it's because I really like this analogy that I either come up with or most likely came across at some point, but forgot where I came across it. So in a 3D game, let's create a cube in our scene here. We're using Unity, which is the engine that we use. In a 3D game, you have 3D objects in the world, and they are rendered to the screen. They are rendered to the screen by assigning a material to that object. And we're going to assign a material. This is a material that... let me step back. So you have an object, and it's rendered to the screen with a material. A material is basically a recipe for how that object gets rendered to the screen. There are two components to a material. So let me click on this material. The two components are, one, the data. This is things like textures or colors. The other part is the shader, which are the steps for how it's rendered to the screen. So if the material is a recipe, then the data are your ingredients, and the shader are the specific steps. So this is a material that uses a custom shader that I've written for our game. It doesn't have any textures assigned yet, so our cube is, well, it's pink, I think because of some lighting in the scene. But otherwise, no detail. So we'll assign just some random texture. I'm not even sure what this is from. But we assign this texture, and now we see that the object has this texture drawn to each of its sides. And there's another texture that's supported on this one. We'll go ahead and add that. It's probably going to get pretty weird. Yeah. That adds an emissive. And then we have our color. So because recipes are different, because you have different steps, I'm smiling because that's such a blatantly obvious statement. But you can do interesting things. So, for example, on this shader, one of the things it does is what's this distance color. As you move the object far away, it will actually fade out the textures. I might need to make it bigger. And you can see it. Let's make it bigger so you can see it better. As the object moves far away, there we go. It fades out the textures and fades in a specific color. Like so. So that's it for this week. We have a bunch of custom shaders, and there were some issues with MIP mapping that were causing seams in the textures. MIP mapping is where you have smaller resolution versions of a texture so that when you're far away, you're not sampling from the full texture because it's not necessary. For example, if I have a texture and it's occupying, 40% of my, or 25% of my screen, like this one is, and my screen is 4K, well, you like that texture to be around 1024 by 1024. Otherwise, if it's 256, it's going to be really blurry. If it's this small little bit out here, assuming the distance color is turned off, you don't need 1024 anymore. It's like 10% or 5% of the screen. It's, like 100 by 100 pixels. So that's really all you need. So that's what mipmaps are doing. That was causing havoc in our shaders, and I have got a solution that, for the most part, fixes it much better. I'll need to revisit at some point in the future. However, I fixed it not really understanding why it's fixed, but just finding some examples on forums and having it understanding at least where I changed things and what's significant about it. But to really understand it, I need to do a deep dive into some areas of the shaders that I'm not familiar with. That's all this week. There's been some exciting developments in the game, but they're more design-wise, so those will be discussed in the future weeks. That's it. Have a great weekend because it is Friday, and thanks for watching.